Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 227. Hope you guys had a great weekend, and we're going to not pick up where we left off in the last podcast, because in this podcast, we're going to finally start talking about political violence. Again, I did the podcast a few weeks ago where we looked at left-wing violence beginning in the 21st century, starting in 1999. We started looking at the left-wing violence in Seattle at the World Trade event in 1999 that led into the 2000 election and the violence that you had at the conventions there, fighting with police, disturbances, and then 9/11 happened and the political violence settled down, and then you start seeing it spring up again. I mean, in a new fashion, quite frankly, in this country, starting in 2016 when Trump was running for president. Everywhere that he went to campaign, well, not everywhere, but he went to campaign behind enemy lines in liberal areas like California, like Santa Fe, New Mexico, like Chicago, and there was massive political violence that you saw in 2016 at Trump rallies, and that led into him winning that election. Major political violence on his inauguration, at his inauguration there in Washington, D.C. We talked about all of that, how out of the two candidates that are running who this year, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, both who had transitions into their position of president, that Trump's transition was not peaceful and Joe Biden's was peaceful. That out of those two, Trump is the only one who had a peaceful transition. So we talked about all that, and we're going to talk about political violence in 2020, in the year 2020 specifically, and what led up to the violence that we saw on January 6th, because January 6th was not the only political violence in 2020. There was a lot of political violence in 2020, but Democrats, the left, they only want you to focus on the violence there on January 6th. So I want to start with this clip. This gentleman is a political strategist. He was George W. Bush's top political strategist in the George W. Bush administration and campaigns in 2000 and 2004. But then he's left the Republican Party since, and I don't know that he was one of the founding members of the Lincoln Project, but he's in that vein of the never Trumper, the neocon who supported Bush and Cheney through all the lying us to wars, running up the debt, old school Mitt Romney, John McCain type of Republican. And that's who Matthew Dow is. I want you to listen to, this was a interview that he gave in 2022, the summer of 2022. And he's talking about the midterm elections. But this is so relevant to what's going on 2 years later in this campaign between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Let's take a listen to Matthew Dow.
And you may not say this directly, or you may. Democrats can keep the House and keep or expand the Senate if they do one thing, which is allow voters to dislike Joe Biden, but give them an argument about why it's so dangerous Republicans can take over power. That's the message they have. Give voters permission to not like Joe Biden in this moment. Don't try to prove out Joe Biden. Don't try to improve his numbers. Don't try to do any of that. Allow the voters to have permission to dislike him and then make the argument of why it's such a disaster for the country if Republicans take power.
So, I mean, I think that's so relevant, even though that was 2 years ago. It's so relevant to what's going on right now. Joe Biden has a 36% approval rating. He's digging in. He's going to be the nominee. But what Dow is saying here, he's saying that it doesn't matter about Joe Biden. And this is before, again, the 2020 midterms. He's giving this advice, but he's basically saying, don't even focus on Joe Biden. Focus on Donald Trump. Focus on the Republicans and how dangerous they are. Scare the electorate. Use fear to scare the electorate. They don't have to like Joe Biden. And I like what he says in the beginning. He says that either you can say this directly or maybe you don't say this directly. But the objective is to scare the electorate, use fear. And it doesn't matter if they like Joe Biden or not. You can turn them out with the fear. Republicans are extremists. Republicans want to take your rights. Republicans are a threat to democracy. They're fascists. All of those things that you hear currently going on in the Joe Biden campaign, those fear tactics. This is the advice that political strategist Matthew Dow was giving to Democrats back in 2022. Let's listen again.
And you may not say this directly, or you may. Democrats.
That's what he says. You may not say this directly, or you may. So you see, I mean, he's a political strategist. You may be honest about the fact that you're scaring people to the polls, or may not say it directly. But the mission is to scare people to the polls. Use fear tactics to get people to turn out to vote for Joe Biden.
Democrats can keep the House and keep or expand the Senate if they do one thing, which is allow voters to dislike Joe Biden, but give them an argument about why it's so dangerous Republicans can take over power. That's the message they have. Give voters permission to not like Joe Biden in this moment. Don't try to prove out Joe Biden. Don't try to improve his numbers. Don't try to do any of that. Allow the voters to have permission to dislike him, and then make the argument of why it's such a disaster for the country if Republicans take power.
So I'm hearing people right now. Whoopi Goldberg today made news because on The View, she was saying that she doesn't care if Joe Biden poops in his pants. She doesn't care, what he does. Bill Maher on his show, he said that he would vote for Joe Biden's head in a jar of blue liquid. That we don't care. It's not about Joe Biden. It's about, I've heard people saying that they would vote for Joe Biden in a coma. It's not about Joe Biden. It is about using that fear of Project 2025, that, if they come in, they're going to bring in Project 25. You got to come out. Even though these people have done nothing to better your lives, even though that think about this, people. They're telling you that Joe Biden is the most effective president since FDR, the most successful president since FDR, that this guy has created 15 million new jobs. The economy's booming under him. He has created peace and prosperity, and everything is roses under the Biden administration, is what they're telling you. If that's true, then why do they have to use fear as a tactic to get out the vote? They should be running on their record, but they're not running on their record. They're running on January 6th. They're running on dictator. They're running on extremists. They want you to be afraid of Donald Trump. That's what they're selling you. They're not selling you their record and all the good things that they've done for you. This is another political strategist. This guy focuses on black voters, though. This is the Roland Martin show, and this black political strategist who is talking to Roland Martin is talking specifically about black voters, but he says the exact same thing as Matthew Dow says. Take a listen.
here are sort of the characteristics that were shown to be the most important when it came to selecting a candidate for Black respondents on a national poll.
So
right?
what he's talking about here is a focus group that they ran with Black voters, and what they learned in their focus group, in their study, talking to these voters about what they wanted in the perfect candidate. If they were going to build the Frankenstein candidate for these black voters to go out and vote for, what would that candidate look like?
Of course, they wanted a Black person.
Of course, they wanted a Black person.
Candidate wanted someone who was middle-aged, around 85, with 8 years of experience in politics. Pick someone who's a state legislator compared to some other occupations. Was important that someone was an ally of the Black Lives Matter movement.
So if you look at this, everything except gender female, I mean, this is Obama. Oh, and endorsed by Bernie Sanders. But look, so this is all the things they want. This is the Frankenstein candidate, according to this political strategist talking to Roland Martin, that these Black voters who they polled and surveyed in their focus group, this is the candidate they're looking for. Race is Black, gender female, age 45, 8 years in politics, state legislature, ally of BLM, endorsed by Bernie Sanders, and served in the military. That's the ideal candidate.
Actually preferred someone endorsed by Sanders rather than endorsed by Biden, and preferred someone who was a veteran. And so as you on the left side here of the findings, right, the most important factors here when deciding between potential candidates was someone's support for Black Lives Matter, someone's race, and someone's years in politics. And so trying to build that perfect candidate is going to be a really hard sell, and it's going to be really difficult for Democrats to find someone who fits that same mold, if not impossible.
So basically what he's saying, that Frankenstein candidate that you're saying that you want, that is basically the female Obama, 45 years old, Black, female, supported Black Lives Matter, a socialist endorsed by Bernie Sanders. All those things, you're not going to get that Frankenstein candidate does not exist. So he has another tactic, and listen to this. It's the same tactic that you just heard Matthew Dow state, that instead of getting the perfect candidate to get these voters to come out and vote for the perfect candidate, because that doesn't exist, this Frankenstein candidate doesn't exist, then we need to scare them to the polls. Take a listen.
Right. And so I'm really encouraging through my research other ways to look at turning Black folk out. And one of the most important factors, aside from sort of this Obama factor, this great hope factor, is actually threat. And looking at how perceptions of threat can push people to the polls in lieu of this sort of magical candidate that creates the same inspiration that we saw once during the Obama administration.
So the perception of threat, to use threat, and the perception of threat to drive these people to the polls is what he says. It's the same thing that you heard Matthew Dow say. That's the same thing that you heard this guy say. That use fear, use the threat of what's going to happen when the Republicans come into office, the threat of the Project 2025, the threat of dictatorship, the threat that we're going to lose our democracy, the threat that there's going to be political violence, all of the threats that they are using to scare up the vote. That is their political strategy. This is a Lincoln Project ad that they just put out today. I want you to take a look at this.
November 5th, 2024. Donald Trump defeats a divided and dispirited Democratic campaign. On January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Unfortunately, he keeps his promises. Trump seizes control of a divided government, signing hundreds of executive orders implementing Project 2025. Trump replaces over 50,000 civil servants with hardline MAGA loyalists. The federal oath of office now requires declaring loyalty to the president, not the Constitution. Protected by the Supreme Court's grant of total immunity for official acts, Donald Trump orders the Department of Justice to arrest members of the January 6th Commission, current and former DOJ employees, and political opponents for treason,
listen to the
election
music. I love
interference,
the music.
and conspiracy.
It's really eerie.
He declares it to
dark.
be an official act. Trump ends birthright citizenship by executive order and turns millions of American-born citizens into illegal aliens overnight. Mass deportations begin.
Oh my God. That sounds great.
Thousands, including legal U.S. residents and American citizens, are imprisoned in newly built camps.
I mean, it sounds like a nightmare. It sounds like it's really like we cannot let these guys get into power, that this is really, really dark, that they're extremists, that these people are going to end our democracy. They're going to end our country. They're going to end everything. This is the Lincoln Project ad, but the ads that Joe Biden's running, the same thing. Oh, January 6th, threat to democracy, dictator, Project 2025, boo. You got to be scared. You got to be scared so you can go to the polls. The only problem with this is that Joe Biden did an interview on Friday, and this was his Get Right interview with George, softball interview. George Stephanopoulos is a Democrat operative. I mean, there's no doubt about that. This guy is a Democrat operative. So, he did ask some tough questions and did take Biden to task, but it wasn't that bad. But Joe Biden let the cat out of the bag in this interview. All of this fear tactic and fear mongering that he's talking about, and dictator and Project 2025, and you're going to lose your rights, and all this stuff that he's talking about, and that Joe Biden is campaigning on, and not his record, the fear tactics that he's campaigning on, that it's all a hoax, that it's all a big facade, that it means nothing. And Joe Biden let the cat out of the bag regarding this hoax that they're running on people, to run on fear, to scare up votes. He let the cat out of the bag when George asked him this. Take a listen.
And if you stay in and Trump is elected and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about.
If everything that you are warning about and that you're scaring people about dictatorship and the loss of our democracy and all of that stuff that you're saying that is going to happen if Republicans take control and Donald Trump wins, and you say that as long as you did the goodest as you can do and gave it your all, that's what this is about. That's what he says. That he asked him, he says, if all of these things that you're scaring people about, all these things that you're running on, these fear tactics, if you stay in this race with the 36% approval rating with the controversy that you're dealing with right now about your age and your cognitive decline, if you stay in this race and you lose and Donald Trump wins and everything that you're scaring people about comes to pass, and we're going to lose our democracy, and that's the end of America and Project 2025 and all that stuff. And this guy says that as long as I did my goodest and gave it my all, that's what this is about. He let the cat out of the bag, people. Let's listen again.
And if you stay in and Trump is elected and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about.
That's what this is about. As long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. Scott Jennings on CNN yesterday on the Sunday show, he basically crystallizes this whole thing and the fact that Joe Biden in that interview let the cat out of the bag, that their scare tactics are nothing but scare tactics. And it's his entire campaign. What you're watching going on in this country right now is, it's absolutely fascinating. what we're watching going on. And it's going to be very interesting over the next 4 months. Let's listen to Scott Jennings here.
Can we just talk about an issue for 1 minute on Friday night? Can he win Michigan? I don't know. I'm not sure what Democrats he's going to win right now. The entire thesis of the campaign, was democracy's on the ballot. And when George Stephanopoulos asked him, well, if you lose and all these bad things come to pass, will you be okay with that? And he said, well, as long as we gave it our all. Now, if I was a Democrat hasn't blinked since January of 2017, or one of these never Trumpers who's worried about all this, and I heard Joe Biden admit that it's all just a facade, that it's all just a talking point.
It's a hoax.
I would be freaked out right now to find out there's no animating issue for this campaign. It's just a grift. It's a grift.
It's just a grift. That's all it is. It's just a grift. All right, so let's start talking about the January 6th commission, bipartisan commission, because that's what they call it. When the media talks about the House commission to investigate January 6th, they always call it a bipartisan commission. And it did start as a bipartisan commission. This article is in March of 2021 is when they first started talking about putting a independent bipartisan commission together to look at the political violence that took place in 2020. And that's the focus that Republicans wanted to have in this commission. And when they were negotiating, they wanted to have Republicans were arguing for a broad focus of all of the political violence that had taken place. Because, again, the only political violence in 2020, actually January 6th happens in 2021, but that wasn't the only political violence in the 12 months leading up to January 6th. There was a lot of political violence, and a lot of political violence that started in May of 2020. So Republicans wanted to look at all of the political violence and do a commission that focused on investigating all of the political violence, who was responsible, what happened, and how to prevent it from happening again, not just January 6th. The Democrats only wanted to focus on January 6th, and that's what they were negotiating when they started. We're going to read a little bit of this article. Bipartisan panel on Capitol riot in danger as Democrats proceed with their own investigation. So they were having trouble negotiating the commission. It wasn't that the Republicans didn't want to take part, but they wanted to have equal say. They wanted to be able to, cross-examine their witnesses and call their own witnesses. They didn't want to just have the Democrats call witnesses. And as these talks started breaking down, the Democrats started to proceed on their own. It says it right here in the headline. Bipartisan panel on Capitol riot in danger as Democrats proceed on their own with their own investigation. So if they proceed with their own investigation, if they proceed on their own, it's not bipartisan anymore, right? It's only bipartisan if they're working together, Democrats and Republicans. That's the only thing that makes it bipartisan. So if they go on their own and they don't work with Democrats in this investigation, then it's not bipartisan. Let's read a little bit of this. Pelosi announced last month. Hold on, I want you to read this with me. I want you to see what's going on here, people. All right. Pelosi announced last month that she wanted to spearhead an independent panel modeled after the 9/11 Commission to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. But the effort has been bogged down in partisan feuding over the makeup of the commission and what exactly it would investigate. The two sides blame each other for the standoff, and while talks aren't dead yet, they have yet to move past the initial dispute over the scope. Okay, scope. Are we only going to look at January 6th and the violence that took place there at the Capitol? Or or are we going to look at all of the violence that took place in 2020, beginning in late May? To move past their dispute over the scope of what the commission would tackle, most notably the role played by former President Donald Trump and whose supporters attacked the Capitol. So that's what the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi wanted to focus on, and wanted to. They not only wanted a narrow focus on January 6th and what happened there at the Capitol, they wanted to narrow the focus even more than that. Not only what happened there at the Capitol, but what was Donald Trump's role? That's the focus. That's all they wanted to focus on. I mean, they didn't want to look at all of the violence in January 6th that took place across the country, as Republicans wanted to. And then even after narrowing the focus only to January 6th, they didn't want to look at the role of the Capitol Police Board and what the Sergeant at Arms of the House did, and what the Chief of Capitol Police did, and why there was a stand down, and why the fence wasn't up, and all. They didn't want to look at any of that. Even in narrowing their investigation to January 6th, they only wanted to narrow the focus to the role of Donald Trump. That's all they wanted to focus on, was Donald Trump, and to get Donald Trump politically. That was the whole focus of the commission, and it wasn't bipartisan. It was completely partisan. Let's read on. Pelosi herself expressed frustration with the lack of progress and accused Republicans of being unwilling to bend, in particular, on the issue of the scope of the investigation. Scope of the investigation was the real point of contention. Why? Because Republicans wanted to look at all of the political violence in 2020, and Democrats had a narrow scope of only looking at the role of President Trump. It was a get Trump commission. Quote, I'm optimistic, the California Democrat said before correcting herself. I'm persistent in the terms of we have to get to the truth now. She didn't want to get to the truth. She only wanted to get to Trump. So it wasn't about getting to the truth. Last paragraph. Both Republicans and Democrats involved in the negotiations say the talks on the issues have ground to a halt with little communication between the two sides. While Pelosi has not agreed to a 50-50 partisan split of the commission, she argues that the real problem is the GOP's unwillingness to focus the probe specifically on what led to insurrection. There was no insurrection. She wanted to narrow the focus into only what happened January 6th and only Donald Trump. Republican leaders have argued political violence in general. We want to look at all the political violence, all the Black Lives Matter violence, all the burning, all the looting. We want to investigate all of that, is what Republicans said. Republican leaders have argued that political violence in general should be the topic of the investigation. So that's where talks broke down. Because Nancy Pelosi didn't want to look at all of the violence. She only wanted to look at the violence on January 6th and particularly the role of Donald Trump. So that was the focus of the commission. When they finally vote in the House of Representatives to create the commission, what does it say right here? Only two Republicans in the House of Representatives voted for the January 6th committee, because the talks and negotiations were breaking down and they didn't want to look at all the violence. They didn't want to allow Republicans to call witnesses. They didn't want a fair commission. So all the entire Republican caucus votes against the commission except two Republicans. I wonder who they were. I wonder who these two Republicans were that voted for the commission, to launch the commission. Oh, it's these guys. It's these guys, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. They were the only two Republicans to vote to create the commission, because the commission wasn't fair and Nancy Pelosi wasn't being fair. So all the other Republicans voted against it, but these guys They voted for it. The only two Republicans that voted for it. The courage. So much courage in Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. It's a joke, people. It's a joke. So even despite all the Republicans voting against it, they all voted against it except the two turncoats. And even despite that Nancy Pelosi not being fair, not letting them call witnesses, not letting them have equal members on the commission, not wanting to broaden the focus to look at all the political violence, even despite all of that, and they end up passing it with two Republicans. And this is why they continue calling it bipartisan. It's bipartisan because these two clowns voted for it. What a joke. What a joke. It's ridiculous. But even despite all of that, it being an unfair commission and Republicans being muscled by the majority, the minority being muscled by the majority is what Nancy Pelosi did, then Republicans were still going to take part in the commission. They still wanted to take part in it, even though it was unfair. They couldn't call any witnesses. They didn't want to establish the commission with the narrow focus. They still said, okay, we'll take part in it. And then McCarthy selects 5 members for the commission. And then Nancy Pelosi, again, the majority muscling the minority, told Kevin McCarthy that 2 of the members that he picked to go on the commission, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, that they could not be on the commission. So she's not even allowing, she's just running roughshod over the minority, not even allowing them to put the members that they want to put on the commission. Everything is unfair from the beginning. It's just the Get Trump Commission, and then they call it a bipartisan commission. Let's listen to McCarthy here.
Step of denying the minority party's picks for the Select Committee on January 6th. This represents something that has not happened in the House before. For
Unprecedented. Unprecedented.
It's an egregious abuse of power. Pelosi has broken this institution, denying the voice of members who have served in the military. Jim Banks, a Navy veteran who served in Afghanistan, serves on HASC, chair of the largest caucus in the Republican Conference, and law enforcement, as well as a leader of a standing committee. Jim Jordan isn't ranking of just his first committee. He's done it before.
And why do you think
Jordan has served?
Why do you think Pelosi didn't want Jim Jordan on the committee, on the commission? You know why she didn't want Jordan on the commission? He wasn't going to take any of that stuff.
Leader of a standing committee. Jim Jordan isn't ranking of just his first committee. He's done it before. Jim Jordan has served on Select Committee and serves on one now. Made it undeniable this panel has lost all legitimacy.
All legitimacy.
And credibility. And it shows exactly what I warned back at the beginning of January, that Pelosi would play politics with this. For more than 6 months, you have a better example of the Senate. Bipartisan. Schumer didn't pick who went on of the Republicans. They already have the report done by 2 different committees.
So what's he talking about there? Schumer didn't pick who goes on the committee, because after these 2 clowns, these 2 payasos, after they voted to create the commission, even though their conference, the people, their colleagues, the people that they caucus with are being treated unfairly, even after that, then Pelosi, because what McCarthy's saying here is that if you're not going to allow us to put Jim Jordan and Jim Banks on the committee, then I'm pulling all of my members. So that's what he did. We're not going to take part in this at all because you're being completely unfair with us. You're abusing your power. We're not going to take part. So then these people are supposed to be Republicans. They caucus with Republicans, but Nancy Pelosi is the one that appoints them to the commission. McCarthy didn't appoint them to the commission. It was Pelosi who appointed them to the commission. This is unprecedented. That's what McCarthy's talking about here.
Two main questions. Why was the Capitol so ill-prepared for that day when they knew on December 14th they had a problem?
Yep. Why don't we get to that?
And what have we done to make sure that never happens again?
Let's get to that. They didn't want to get to any of those. They did not want to get to any of the answers to those questions because the answers to those questions, McCarthy, are going to lead you right back here. The answers to those questions are going to lead you right back here. So that's why she did what she did. That's why she wanted to narrow the focus and not ask the questions about, why the Capitol was unprotected and unprepared, even though they had a internal report telling them that there was going to be violence and Congress was the target. Despite all of that and their $500 million budget and all the tools we supplied them with not being used, they didn't want to answer those questions because if you answer those questions, McCarthy, it's going to lead you right back here. Going to lead you right back here. So that's why she ran over you guys and wouldn't allow you to seat the members on the commission that you wanted to, wouldn't allow you to call witnesses. And then these two turncoats turn on their colleagues and their caucus and vote to create the commission. And then Nancy Pelosi, the majority leader, appoints them to the commission. And then they're censored by their party. Then the Republican Party censors these two clowns. They're no longer in Congress anymore. They no longer represent any Americans in anything. And they've been censored by the Republican Party, but they still call it a bipartisan commission. They still say that the report is bipartisan. I mean, it's ridiculous. Nothing could be more ridiculous. So what was it that they were hiding in 2020 in the broader scope that Republicans wanted to look at of political violence, not just the narrow scope of what happened on January 6th, but what happened throughout the summer of love for George Floyd and Black Lives Matter over the summer of 22. What were they hiding? What did they not want to look at in regards to that political violence and why they only wanted to narrow the scope to January 6th? Well, we're going to look at what they were hiding here in a minute in this podcast, and we're going to get back into this in the next podcast. But I want you to listen to some of the Capitol Police, and this guy's not Capitol Police. He was Metropolitan DC Metro Police, but this is a panel testifying to the January 6th Commission, and it's got how do you pronounce his name? Fanone, Michael Fanone, and the big black guy, what's his name? Dunn, Officer Dunn, and some other officers here, and they're testifying to all of the violence they experienced on January 6th. And this was a highlight of the propaganda around January 6th is the poor police officers. They attack the police officers and we stand up for the police officers. Never mind that throughout 2020, these guys were attacking police officers, running a campaign to defund the police for Black Lives Matter, shooting police. There were police shot in LA through Black Lives Matter, police hurt. I mean, police injured through all of that stuff. But they didn't care about the police until January 6th. And then they do a stand down and allow these poor police officers from Capitol Police to be attacked. And then they use them as propaganda. I want you to listen to a little bit of the testimony from these guys.
Concerns, that being the immediate security of the Capitol building itself, also the forced mobilization of officers that day, planning and preparation, and training and equipment concerns. A lot of, the events of January 6th and the days preceding. I guess it's interesting, and from a law enforcement perspective, as a police officer, a lot of these events happen in plain sight. We had violent political rhetoric. We had the organization of a rally whose title was Stop the Steal. And that rally occurred on January 6th, which I don't believe was a coincidence that on January 6th, members of Congress, you here in the room today, were charged with tallying the electoral votes and certifying the election.
Yeah, going back to what we talked about in the last podcast, that's not the only thing that was going on there. They weren't just tallying the votes and certifying the election. They were also objecting to the electoral votes from certain states.
You here in the room today were charged with tallying the electoral votes and certifying the election of our president. And in the academy, we learn about time, place, and circumstance in investigating potential crimes and those who may have committed them. And so the time, the place, and the circumstances of that rally, that rhetoric, and those events, to me, leads in the direction of our president and other members, not only of Congress and the Senate, but that is what I am looking for, is an investigation into those actions and activities which may have resulted in the events of January 6th.
So this guy is he's an operative. He's a complete operative. And so is this guy. I want you to listen to a little bit of this. Dunn is his name.
We lost
Harry
our
Dunn.
layer of protection that we had, and the fence came down and still nothing has changed. Everything is different, but nothing has changed. Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are being lauded as courageous heroes. And while I agree with that notion, why? Because they told the truth? Why is telling the truth hard? I guess in this America, it is.
And this guy's such an
As
actor.
for officers, we would do January 6th all over again. We wouldn't stay home because we knew it was going to happen.
I wonder if the part of Adam Kinzinger, because right after they testified is when Adam Kinzinger started crying. You guys held. You guys held. I mean, please, people, this is a hoax. You care about the police now? You don't want to defund the police now? You care so much about the police. You don't care anything about these guys. It's all part of their propaganda. They totally lied on this Capitol police officer and said that he was killed during January 6th. And then they shaped this entire propaganda around this guy, Brian Sicknick. I want you to listen to this. They said that he was attacked and hit with the fire hose, and they sprayed stuff on him, and then he was killed there at the Capitol Police riot, and they used all this propaganda to paint Trump supporters as murderers because they murdered this officer on Capitol Police. There's only one person that was murdered on January 6th. Only one person. And it was an unarmed veteran, female veteran named Ashley Babbitt. That was the only person that was murdered. And they told you that this guy was murdered by Trump supporter, and they created this entire propaganda around his death when he died of natural causes.
It comes as the New York Times is reporting that the FBI has now zeroed in on an unnamed assailant in the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who died after he fought with protesters. According to the Times, the FBI suspects Sicknick may have died because of a bad reaction to being hit with bear spray or mace.
Lie.
Capitol Police released a statement on Friday saying that they are now awaiting toxicology results and that they're investigating.
So they said that bear spray or mace, or that also they were saying that he was hit in the head with the fire extinguisher. None of that was true. But that didn't stop Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats using his death as propaganda. They laid his body in repose in the rotunda in the Capitol so people could come and view his remains. They used this poor man's death, in a way to sell the Reichstag fire and the January 6th narrative and to get more sympathy. Oh, look at what they did to the Capitol Police. Look at what they did to this poor police officer.
Now, this is the public memorial for Officer Brian Sicknick. He is a former service member who deployed to battle enemies abroad only to be killed defending a symbol of democracy at home.
Lie.
The urn carrying the 42-year-old's remains was
Listen to
placed
that. He was killed defending democracy at home. He wasn't killed. It's a lie.
Who deployed to battle enemies abroad only to be killed defending a symbol of democracy at home. The urn carrying the 42-year-old's remains was placed in the rotunda rioters stormed 4 weeks ago. Lying in honor at the Capitol is considered a sacred tribute. Officer Sicknick is only the 5th private citizen to lie in the rotunda. President Biden and the First Lady also came to pay their respects along with his Capitol Police counterparts.
So it was all propaganda. All propaganda, but most of Americans bought it. Most of Americans don't even know what really happened to that guy. Still to this day, many Americans believe what the media lied to them and told them about that officer and that he was killed on January 6th. I want you to listen to Bill Maher here.
Right. Like there was never an attack on the Capitol, Megan.
Oh, I hear you. But he's
that
not going to show
happened.
up at the inauguration.
Like they didn't show up at the Capitol and break windows and knock down doors and kill cops. And
They didn't do that.
And they didn't break windows,
They didn't
knock
kill
down
cops.
They of course did.
No, they didn't.
Who did? They died of natural causes that day?
Yeah, nobody died that day.
They died of natural causes that day? This is Associated Press. They died of natural causes that day? Medical ruling. Capitol cop Sicknick died of natural causes. This is Associated Press, Bill Maher. Associated Press. Medical ruling. Capitol cop Sicknick died of natural causes. He says it that, they died of natural causes, but the guy says it facetiously. Like he thinks that he's so smart and he's actually an idiot. Yes, he died of natural causes, clown.
Knock down doors and kill cops and chase.
They didn't do that.
And they didn't break windows,
They didn't
knock
kill
down
cops.
They of course did.
No, they didn't.
Who did? They died of natural causes that day?
Yeah, nobody died that day.
Cops.
No, not true.
No.
Who?
Okay.
It was the next day of natural causes.
They didn't.
I don't even remember the
Brian
names.
Sicknick.
Oh, I don't remember the names. I don't even remember the names is what he says. You don't care about that cop. He just wants to use it for politics. He just wants to use it for propaganda. I don't remember the name. I don't even know his name.
They of course did.
No, they didn't.
Who did? They died of natural causes that day?
Yeah, nobody died that day.
Cops.
No, not true.
No. Ashley Babbitt.
Okay.
That's it. Ashley Babbitt.
I don't remember the names.
I don't remember the
There was
names.
Brian Sicknick, who died later after the fact, and the coroner's report did not say it
Had
was
a
because
stroke.
of what he had inhaled that day. He said it had possibly accelerated the condition that killed him.
Okay, well, attacked cops. I thought they were
Yes.
I thought they were the law enforcement people.
I thought they were the law enforcement people. Attacked cops. I thought they were the law enforcement people. So that's the narrative that the Republicans, the Trump supporters, attack the cops, and we're the ones who care about these poor cops, the cops that we don't even remember their names. We're the ones who really care about these officers. I don't remember their names. But we're the ones who really care about these poor Capitol Police officers that were attacked by the Trump supporters. But I don't remember their names, is what Bill Maher says. Yes. The guy who you guys used for propaganda and said that was killed in January 6th was not killed. He died a day after, and he died of natural causes, a stroke. No police officers were killed on January 6th, like what happened over the summer of love in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter riot. This is another clip from this clown, Harry Dunn, the police officer who is being used by the Democrats. This was out the the press conference that they did outside the courthouse there in New York when Donald Trump was standing trial. You'll see Robert De Niro in the back here. This is when that whole De Niro speech went down. I want you to listen to Dunn here.
Good morning. If January 6th didn't happen, we wouldn't be here right now. I'd still be at work, working at the United States Capitol. I appreciate the words by Mr. De Niro, Officer Fanone, but anytime I get an opportunity to acknowledge, address, and thank the men and women of the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Department who served that day to protect our democracy, to protect each other, to make sure everybody got to go home that night. That's what we fought for that day. The fight for a lot of us didn't end on January 6th, that evening when we went home. The fight still continues now. What happened that day was an attempt to overthrow an election. Donald Trump is the greatest threat to our democracy and the safety of communities across the country today. He has encouraged and continued to encourage political violence.
Political violence.
We've been called traitors just today. We were all called traitors on January 6th for doing our job. And yes, we protected Republicans. We protected Democrats alike. It's not about the story that we don't agree with. Political violence is never acceptable.
Political violence is never acceptable.
You have a presidential candidate that champions it, that encourages it, that supports it.
So we have
not have that.
We have a presidential candidate that champions, that supports, and encourages political violence. That Donald Trump encourages and supports political violence. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. I don't have much time today, but we'll pick this up on Friday. I want to get back into this political violence. But with the last few minutes that we have today, we're going to talk about the beginning of the political violence in 2020, the summer of 2020. It happened after the video of George Floyd dying in custody started to go viral at the end of May. We had already been dealing with COVID for about 4 months, and we had been locked down, and out of nowhere, that video starts to spread in the election year, and it's the beginning of political violence like we've never, ever seen in this country. And this is the political violence that Nancy Pelosi did not want to work with the Republicans and to investigate and to have a broad scope and an independent bipartisan commission and really look at all the political violence and how we can end political violence in this country. Because like Harry Dunn just said, political violence is not acceptable. We just can't look at one side of political violence. We need to look at all the political violence. And this is the political violence that Nancy Pelosi did not want to investigate. This is a clip from the movie The Fall of Minneapolis. And this is the day after that video starts to go viral. And this is the ground zero of the political violence in 2020.
When did you realize this wasn't a typical riot response?
Pretty early on, there was no response at all. They didn't say why, but I assumed they didn't want to make us look militant with the rioters. I actually had gear, but they were just saying, just wear your helmets and stand there, basically.
So this is coming from the mayor. So the mayor would not allow them to use their most sophisticated equipment to confront this crowd, this BLM George Floyd crowd in its infancy. They would not let them use their most sophisticated tools. The mayor of Minneapolis.
Obviously, they didn't take my request for more resources seriously.
Nope, no more resources.
We were just watching it unfold without less than lethal, without SWAT teams, without riot gear.
So they wouldn't give them the SWAT teams, wouldn't give them the less than lethal tools that they needed to confront this crowd. What does that remind you of? It reminds you of exactly what they did at the Capitol. They wouldn't give the Capitol Police guys that they care so much about that they don't know their names. They wouldn't allow them to use their less than lethal tools and their equipment. What does this article say? I've read it to you before. Capitol Police told to hold back riot response on January 6th. Report find. Despite being tipped that Congress itself was the target on January 6th, police were ordered not to use their most powerful crowd control weapons, according to scathing report. So the same thing that they were doing there on January 6th there at the Capitol, not allowing these officers to use their most sophisticated tools to protect themselves. That's the same thing that they did in Minneapolis when the Black Lives Matter violence and riots started. And who runs Minneapolis? Who was the mayor at this time? It was this guy with the Hillary Clinton socks. This guy, Jacob Frey, with the Hillary Clinton socks. He was running the city. So he wouldn't allow them to use their tools, and he was allowing these officers to be attacked.
Had protective gear on. We were just in our uniforms.
At this point, they're not giving you permission to wear your riot gear?
No, there was no riot gear given to anybody at that point, and we're in the middle of a war zone. It was just officer after officer. Injured, back in.
Officer after officer injured. Officer after officer injured, huh?
I mean, it was 30 officers that evening probably that got injured while they were out there.
30 officers injured.
To deal with the riots.
We were in a squad car, me and my partner, and we were at Chicago and Lake. And we had a observe and report post, basically. So we watched them with our own two eyes break into the T-Mobile store, Foot Locker, Chicago Lake Liquors. And we were given a play-by-play over the radio. And the only sponsor we would get back is just copy,
let them loot.
Observe and report.
Let them loot.
We watched them loot. We watched them light the Molotov cocktail.
Oh my God!
And we watched them throw it.
This
into
target.
Fire department wasn't responding then.
And we were at Chicago and Lake, and we had a observe and report post, basically. So we watched them with our own two eyes break into the T-Mobile store, Foot Locker, Chicago Lake Liquors. And we were given a play-by-play over the radio. And the only sponsor we would get back is just copy, observe, and report. We watched them loot.
This target right here. This target right here. Ooh-wee. They went wild on this target. I want you to show you this clip. This is a video of inside the Target when they go inside this Target and start looting. Check this out. This is what Nancy Pelosi didn't want to investigate. Now, let's not investigate this. Just focus on January 6th. Just focus on January 6th, not this. Look at this. Look like animals. This is ridiculous. This happened nationwide. We're going to get back into this in the next podcast. This happened nationwide. This is only the beginnings. This is the infancy of it. Look at this. All right, let's go back to fall in Minneapolis. All right, here we go.
Molotov cocktail, and we watched them throw it into the building.
They're starting to throw Molotov cocktails.
We were ordered not to do anything.
Ordered not to do anything.
Fire department wasn't responding then. We were trying to put out fires along, and cars were trying to run us off the road when we were trying to do that. All kinds of things were happening to our team. And it wasn't just me, but all the strike teams and all the officers during that time. The stuff that was going on, shots fired. It was completely utter chaos.
This was just kind of wandering around aimlessly, waiting to be told what not to do next.
Did you ever feel like there was a plan?
I am reaching to this man
get Joe Biden elected.
What's our plan? What's our plan? What's our plan?
The plan was the plan was get Joe Biden elected. That was the
post over and over again about what's our plan? What's our plan? What's our plan? Without any response whatsoever.
They're not saying anything at all?
No, nothing.
Nope, nothing.
Command, can you advise?
The elections were coming up. Everything's politically driven. They were going to use this incident for a political narrative, and they did.
Like Jacob Frey, look at him and crying, pretending like he's crying in front of George Floyd's gold casket. This guy.
It started with the tragic and senseless murder of George Floyd, and it extended through the week of righteous anger being expressed by community leaders and all people of conscience.
If you're feeling that sadness and that anger, it's not only understandable, it's right.
Poor Target.
I end up on the phone with the assistant chief. He's like, so our plan is we're going to take all the squad cars and everything around and make the precinct look abandoned. And if no one's there, it shouldn't be a target. And I'm literally just staring at the phone like, this, how is this the plan? Like, there's thousands of protesters. There's thousands of rioters. They have dead pigs in front of us.
Dead pigs.
They will kill a cop.
They love the police.
To go down to the precinct to remove all of the shotguns and patrol rifles and ammunition from the precinct. When I got down there, you would swear it was kids moving out of college dormitory because there was moving trucks and everything out back, literally emptying out the precinct.
People were showing up at the precinct, gathering their things. So they'd come through the fence, get let in, go to the locker, grab their stuff, and walk out. And I was like, where are you going? Oh, I'm just coming to get my stuff in case they give away the precinct. Like, it's got our museum stuff. Pretty soon, 2 vans showed up and cleaned out all the museum items.
You're talking 20, 30 years of pictures, artifacts that are on the wall supposed to be for eternity.
So you're a lieutenant in this building, and you don't even know that the plan is to surrender it later in the evening?
No, not even a clue. As they were like cleaning things out, they took all the cameras out because they didn't want the rioters to break them. We're now in a precinct with boarded up windows. I could tell what was going on outside. I couldn't see it, but you could hear it. You could tell. I knew there were fires. The radio traffic was completely insane. It was fire after fire after fire. The whole city was burning, just like night 1 and night 2.
Looks like the U.S. Bank building at 28th and Lake is on fire. Flames above the buildings in front of it.
Copy. U.S. Bank at 28th and Lake appears to be on fire.
Large fire east of the 3rd precinct.
Copy. Large fire east of the 3rd precinct, 2118.
I was shocked. I said, no way, no fucking way. And the city's not that stupid. They're not going to do that. You can't just give up a precinct. I did not think anybody in their right mind would think it would be a good tactical move to give up a precinct.
I made the decision to evacuate the 3rd precinct.
When do you get word that it's finally time to leave the building?
So I get a command over the radio that we need to evacuate the 3rd precinct.
Evacuate now, evacuate now.
I said, like, right now?
Do we have to evacuate right now?
And they said, yes, immediately.
You need to evacuate now. Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate.
I have 50-some people. I quickly get on the air and tell everyone to gather in the roll call room. I get a phone call from the head of 911 as I'm trying to do roll call, and she says, our whole 911 backup system is there. You need to go get the radios. And I'm like, okay, so either we're in so much danger that we're trying to evacuate right this second, or we're not. We're going now as fast as we possibly can. A few SWAT teams come in. I realize they are our escort out, and one of the SWAT team leaders looks at me and he says, why are we evacuating? And he's coming from the outside in, and I can't see on the outside of the building. So I'm like, why? And I don't know. He doesn't know. I don't know. We just have to evacuate.
Evacuate now, evacuate now. Time is 21:55.
They're about to breach the back gate.
Everything was happening so fast and there was such chaos. You know, the heart's racing right now talking about this.
And we run.
We run with our belts on and 50-some people and 3 SWAT teams, and we get to the fence. We can't get out.
We got to go where you're sitting just here.
There was only one way in and one way out, and the way out was locked.
1283, they've reached the northwest corner of the front. Northwest corner of the front has been reached. They're coming in the back. We need to move, Need to move now.
One of the squads rams through the fence to get it open.
I remember looking through the rearview mirror as we left. It looked like a zombie movie. They all just rushed to the fence and started climbing the fence, and they caused the fences to collapse, and then they just all rushed the precinct.
And these are the people that love the police, people, the police officers. These are the people that are warning you about political violence. We're going to get back into this in the next podcast. I'm going to show you what Nancy Pelosi said about this. I'm going to show you what other Democrats said about this, what our Vice President Kamala Harris said about what happened in Minneapolis and all the violence that took place in 2020 and the summer in 2020. This violence that Nancy Pelosi did not want the commission looking at. She did not want an investigation. None of those people went in jail. They went to jail like the people rotting in jail right now from January 6th. It's pathetic. We'll get back into this on Friday. You guys have a great week.